The carriage wheels churned through the deepening mud. Each rotation, a heavy sigh against the encroaching dusk. Elara leaned her head back against the plush velvet, the rhythmic jostle of the ride a counterpoint to the thrumming anticipation in her chest. Beyond the misted window, the ancient trees of the estate loomed, skeletal fingers reaching for a sky that was rapidly bruised with the promise of a storm. Rain had begun to fall, a soft, insistent drumming against the roof, an orchestral prelude to the isolation she craved. And perhaps the unexpected. She was here to catalogue a library, a task that had drawn her from the clamor of the city to the hushed grandeur of Blackwood Manor. Her predecessor had left the project incomplete, citing a vague, unsettling atmosphere, a claim Elara had dismissed with a professional shrug. She sought order, the quiet satisfaction of history meticulously arranged. What she hadn't anticipated was the immediate, almost corporeal presence of the house itself. It wasn't unsettling, not precisely. It was gallivanting. The carriage finally drew to a halt before a massive oak door, weathered dark with centuries of rain and sun. A solitary lamp cast a golden pool on the wet flagstones, illuminating the intricate carvings that adorned the portal. A maid, petite and with kind eyes, hurried out from under the portico, an oversized umbrella struggling against a sudden gust of wind. "Miss Vance?" the maid asked, her voice a soft flutter. "Welcome to Blackwood. I'm Eleanor. Mr. Thorne is expecting you." Elara stepped out, pulling her cashmere wrap tighter against the damp chill that instantly kissed her skin. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, old stone, and something else. A faint, sweet musk, like ancient roses preserved in amber. She took a deep breath, letting the scent fill her. "Thank you, Eleanor. Please call me Elara." Eleanor led her into a vast entrance hall. The air inside was warmer, imbued with the rich aroma of polished wood and a distant, smoky fire. Her gaze swept upwards, tracing the intricate plasterwork on the high ceiling, then across the walls adorned with tapestries depicting scenes of forgotten hunts and mythical beasts. It was magnificent, overwhelming, and utterly silent, save for the distant rumble of thunder. "Mr. Thorne is in the library," Eleanor murmured, sensing Elara's absorption. "He insisted on greeting you personally." Elara followed, her footsteps muffled by thick Persian carpets. The house unfolded around them, a labyrinth of shadowed corridors and unexpected archways. She caught glimpses of vast drawing rooms draped in velvet, a grand dining hall with a table set for an army of ghosts. This wasn't just a house, it was a world. Eleanor stopped before a heavy, dark wood door. "Here we are." She knocked softly, then pushed it open. The library was even grander than Elara had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stretched endlessly, packed with leather-bound volumes, their spines a testament to centuries of collected knowledge. A roaring fire blazed in a stone hearth, casting a warm, dancing light that caught the dust motes swirling in the air. The scent here was different, old paper, worn leather, and something uniquely masculine, like a faint trace of expensive tobacco and a subtle, intoxicating spice. And then she saw him. He stood by a tall mullioned window, his back to her, silhouetted against the stormy grey light outside. He was tall, undeniably, with broad shoulders that spoke of quiet strength. As Eleanor announced her presence, he turned. "Rhys Thorne." Her breath hitched. The photographs she'd seen in the society pages, glimpses of him at charity galas or art auctions, had not done him justice. They captured the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the aristocratic tilt of his head, but they failed to convey the raw, captivating intensity that radiated from him in person. His hair was the color of midnight, falling slightly over a high, intelligent forehead. His eyes, in the low light, were difficult to discern, but she felt their weight, a direct, unwavering gaze that seemed to peel back layers. His jawline was strong, a hint of stubble adding a rugged edge to his otherwise refined features. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit, the fabric stretched taut across his powerful frame. He moved with a languid grace that belied his size, a predator in a drawing room. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. It was a voice that belonged to hushed confessions and dark secrets, a voice that could make promises or demands with equal, unsettling ease. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor. I trust your journey wasn't too arduous." "Mr. Thorne," Elara managed, her voice feeling surprisingly steady despite the sudden racing of her pulse. She extended a hand and he took it. His touch was firm, warm, electric. It was just a handshake, a polite formality, yet it lingered, a spark igniting between their palms. His thumb brushed lightly over the back of her hand, a fleeting, almost imperceptible caress that sent a jolt straight through her. His gaze remained locked with hers, an unspoken question, a silent acknowledgement of the current that had just passed between them. "Not at all," she replied, withdrawing her hand slowly, aware of the sudden coolness where his had been. "The journey was captivating. The estate is magnificent." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a flash of white against the darkness of his features. "It has its charms. Please, call me Whis." "Elara," she responded, feeling a strange lightness in her chest. "Eleanor will show you to your rooms. Dinner will be served in an hour. We can discuss the library then, if you wish." His eyes flickered, a deep, unreadable brown, holding hers for a beat longer than strictly necessary. "I imagine you'll want to settle in." "Thank you, Whis." As Eleanor led her away, Elara felt the weight of his gaze on her back, a tangible heat that followed her out of the library and down the vast, quiet corridor. Her skin prickled. It wasn't just the house that was alive, it was the man who inhabited it, breathing life into every shadow, every hushed silence. Her rooms were expansive, luxurious, with a view of the storm-lushed gardens. A four-poster bed draped in heavy velvet dominated the sleeping chamber, and a separate sitting room offered a comfortable chaise, long by a smaller, crackling fire. Eleanor had already unpacked her trunks, her few personal items neatly arranged. Elara changed into a simple, elegant dark green dress, the silk flowing against her skin. She brushed her auburn hair until it gleamed, then left it loose, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. As she applied a touch of lipstick, she caught her reflection in the antique mirror. Her eyes, usually a calm hazel, seemed to hold a new depth, a spark of something she couldn't quite name. Dinner was served in a smaller, more intimate dining room off the main hall. The table was set for two, bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. The storm had intensified, the wind howling around the eaves, the rain lashing against the windows in a frantic rhythm. It only served to heighten the sense of profound isolation, of being cocooned within the ancient walls with only him. Whis was already seated when she entered, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He rose as she approached, pulling out her chair with a courteous gesture. The scent of him, subtle and intoxicating, enveloped her for a fleeting moment as he leaned close. "I hope you find your rooms comfortable," he said, his voice a low murmur against the backdrop of the storm. "They are exquisite, thank you," Elara replied, feeling a warmth spread through her. They began with a delicate consommé, followed by pan-seared duck breast with cherry reduction and roasted root vegetables. The food was exceptional, but Elara found her attention constantly drawn to the man across from her. He ate with a quiet efficiency, his movements precise, almost economical. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words were chosen with care, his observations sharp and insightful. He asked about her work, about the challenges of cataloging, listening intently to her answers. "So you thrive on bringing order to chaos," he mused, a faint smile playing on his lips as he watched her. "A noble pursuit, especially in a house that perhaps resists it." Elara met his gaze, feeling the familiar pull, the magnetic field that seemed to exist between them. Perhaps chaos has its own kind of order, waiting to be discovered. And I suspect this house has many secrets, not just books, waiting to be catalogued. His eyes held hers. "Indeed. Blackwood has seen many lives, many stories. It breathes them in." He took a slow sip of his wine, his gaze never leaving hers. "And you, Elara, what stories do you bring with you?" The question, so casually posed, felt deeply personal, almost intrusive. It wasn't just curiosity, It felt like an invitation, a challenge. Only the usual ones, she said, a small self-deprecating smile on her lips. A life lived among dusty volumes and quiet contemplation. He chuckled softly, a rich, warm sound that resonated in the quiet room. I doubt that very much. There's a fire in your eyes, Elara Vance, that no amount of dust could ever dull. A blush crept up her neck, despite her best efforts to maintain composure. His words were a caress, a recognition she hadn't expected. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken tension. They moved on to a rich chocolate torte, the sweetness a counterpoint to the growing intensity between them. The conversation drifted to art, to history, to the subtle nuances of human nature. Elara found herself drawn into his intellect, the breadth of his knowledge, the surprising sensitivity in his observations. He wasn't just a wealthy, handsome man. He was complex, profound, and utterly captivating. The storm shows no sign of abating, Whis observed as Eleanor cleared the dessert plates. Perhaps a brandy by the fire in the drawing room? Elara nodded, a silent agreement. The thought of retreating to her solitary rooms felt suddenly unbearable. She wanted to prolong this strange, intoxicating connection. The drawing room was immense, dominated by a magnificent fireplace where logs blazed, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. Velvet armchairs were arranged around it, inviting intimacy. Whis poured 2 snifters of aged brandy, the amber liquid swirling like liquid fire. He handed one to her, his fingers brushing hers again. A brief, delicious contact. She sank into the armchair, the warmth of the brandy seeping through her, matching the warmth that had settled deep within her. The firelight played across his features as he sat opposite her, highlighting the sharp planes of his face, the intensity of his eyes. "Tell me about the library," Elara prompted, needing a topic, something to anchor herself against the rising tide of sensation. Whis leaned back, the glass cradled in his long fingers. "It's been neglected for decades. My family has always been collectors, less so organizers. The previous curator, a rather eccentric fellow, made a start. But I believe he found the scope of the project, and perhaps the solitude of Blackwood, rather overwhelming." His gaze lingered on her, a subtle challenge in its depths. "You don't strike me as someone easily overwhelmed, Elara." "I find solitude invigorating," she replied, taking a slow sip of her brandy, the rich warmth spreading through her. "And a challenge is merely an opportunity for discovery." "Indeed." He raised his glass to her, a silent toast. "Discovery. A word I find increasingly appealing." The conversation dwindled, replaced by the crackle of the fire and the insistent drumming of the rain. The silence was not awkward, it was charged, brimming with unspoken thoughts and desires. Elara found herself studying him. The way the firelight caught the silver threads at his temples, the strong column of his throat as he swallowed, the subtle tension in his jaw. She imagined the feel of his skin, the texture of his hair, the taste of the brandy on his lips. He seemed to sense her scrutiny, his eyes meeting hers across the flickering flames. A slow smile spread across his face, not the polite one from earlier, but something deeper, more knowing, almost predatory. It sent a shiver through her, a delicious frisson of fear and excitement. "You're very quiet, Elara," he murmured, his voice a low whisper that seemed to cut through the storm's roar. "I'm observing," she confessed, her voice barely a breath. "Taking it all in. This house, it's all rather remarkable." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze never leaving hers. "And what do you observe?" The directness of his question stole her breath. She felt herself drawn into the vortex of his eyes, a deepening brown that seemed to hold untold depths. "I observe a man who carries the weight of history with grace, a man who is as complex and intriguing as the manor he inhabits." His smile widened, a slow, sensual curve of his lip. "And you, Elara Vance, are far more than a woman who organizes books. There's a passion in you, a quiet intensity that belies your demure facade. I feel it, even across this room." Her heart hammered against her ribs. He saw her. Truly saw her, beneath the layers of professionalism and quiet competence. The compliment, the recognition, was like a spark, kindling a light within her. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken desire, with the electric current that had pulsed between them since their first touch. He rose slowly, moving with that same languid grace, and walked to the window. He stood there for a moment, his back to her, looking out at the storm. Elara watched the play of shadows on his broad shoulders, the way the dark fabric of his suit stretched across his powerful frame. She felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to trace the line of his spine, to feel the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips. He turned, his eyes piercing through the gloom. The night is long, Elara, and the storm shows no sign of relenting. He didn't move towards her, but the unspoken invitation hung in the air, thick and palpable. It wasn't a demand, but a quiet offering, a silent question. The storm outside raged, a perfect mirror to the tempest brewing within her. Every nerve ending in her body sang with awareness, with a longing that had been dormant for too long. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not just the master of the house, but a man who was as drawn to her as she was to him. The raw magnetism between them was undeniable, a force that hummed in the air, vibrating between their bodies. Elara slowly set her brandy glass down on the small table beside her, the soft clink echoing in the silence. Her gaze never left his. The fire crackled, the rain hammered, and the wind howled, but all she heard was the frantic beat of her own heart, and the quiet, almost imperceptible whisper of his name on her lips. He took a step towards her, then another, his eyes never leaving hers. The distance between them slowly diminished, each step a deliberate, potent movement. The air thickened with anticipation, a silent symphony of desire building to a crescendo. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him, close enough to discern the dark depths of his pupils, the faint, intriguing scent of him. "Elara," he breathed, his voice a barely audible whisper, a counterpoint to the raging storm, a secret shared only between them. "I feel as if I've been waiting for you here in the quiet of Blackwood for a very long time." Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to respond, but no words would come. Only a profound, aching yearning that resonated deep within her soul. The unspoken invitation in his eyes was overwhelming, irresistible. She rose from the armchair, slowly, deliberately, her gaze locked with his, a silent acceptance of the potent, thrilling current that coursed between them. He reached out, his hands slowly extending towards her. His fingers, long and strong, paused inches from her face, tracing an invisible line along her cheekbone, down her jaw, before gently cupping her chin. His touch was featherlight, sending a shiver of pure sensation through her. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the exquisite anticipation, the barely there caress that promised so much more. When she opened them, his face was closer, his eyes dark with an intensity that took her breath away. He was so close she could feel the faint warmth of his breath on her lips, smell the subtle, intoxicating scent of him. Her body hummed, alive with a desire she hadn't known she possessed. "Whispers, Elara," he murmured, his thumb brushing slowly, sensuously over her lower lip. "This house is full of them. And tonight, I think it's time for ours to begin." His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingering there, a silent question. The storm outside raged, a wild, untamed force. But in the drawing room, time seemed to slow, suspended in the potent space between their bodies, between their breaths. Elara found herself leaning in, an unconscious, irresistible movement, her lips parting slightly in an invitation she couldn't deny. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingering there, a silent question. The storm outside raged, a wild, untamed force. But in the drawing room, time seemed to slow, suspended in the potent space between their bodies, between their breaths. Elara found herself leaning in, an unconscious, irresistible movement, her lips parting slightly in an invitation she couldn't deny. Whis closed the small distance between them, a breath-held moment before his lips met hers. It was soft at first, a feather-light brush that sent a shiver tracing down Ilara's spine, a delicate exploration that promised more. He tasted of the rich, dark wine they'd shared, and something inherently Whis, a clean, masculine scent that was both earthy and refined, a subtle hint of the rain-kissed outdoors. Her hands, as if guided by an unseen force, found purchase on his strong shoulders, her fingers curling into the fine wool of his jacket. Then the gentleness deepened, intensified. His mouth slanted over hers, a confident, possessive claim that stole the air from her lungs and ignited a fierce, answering fire in her veins. His thumb, which had been caressing her lip, now moved to cup her jaw, his touch firm, reassuring, yet intensely sensual. She felt the subtle shift in his body, the way he leaned into her, drawing her closer until there was no discernible space left between them. The world outside, the roaring wind and drumming rain, faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the frantic beat of her own heart, thrumming a wild rhythm against her ribs. Ilara's lips parted further, an eager gasp caught in her throat as his tongue traced the seam of her mouth, a silent request for entry. Without hesitation she granted it, her own tongue meeting his in a slow, languid dance that quickly spiraled into something more urgent, more demanding. It was a kiss that spoke of long-suppressed desires, of unspoken yearnings finally given voice. She tasted passion, a deep, resonant craving that mirrored her own, and a hint of something more profound, a tenderness that surprised and captivated her. Her fingers tightened on his shoulders, then slid up to entangle themselves in the thick dark hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer still. His arms wrapped around her waist, anchoring her against him, his hands splayed wide on the small of her back, pressing her hips into his. She felt the hard planes of his chest, the tautness of his muscles, and a delicious warmth bloomed low in her belly, spreading outwards like wildfire. Every nerve ending seemed to awaken, tingling with an exquisite awareness. When he finally broke the kiss, it was with a soft, ragged groan, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the charged air. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his, which were dark, dilated, and brimming with an intensity that made her tremble. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low, husky rumble that vibrated through her. I think this story is going to be a very long one." She managed a shaky breath, a small, breathless laugh escaping her lips. "I hope so, Whis. I truly hope so." He kissed her again, this time a series of soft, lingering brushes against her mouth, her chin, the sensitive curve of her jaw, trailing down to the pulse, fluttering wildly at the base of her throat. Each touch was a spark, each whisper of his lips against her skin, a promise. Her head tilted back, offering him more access, her eyes closing again as she surrendered to the exquisite sensations. "You are, intoxicating," he whispered against her skin, his words a warm caress. His hands moved, slowly, deliberately, from her waist up her sides, tracing the elegant curve of her ribs, brushing against the soft swell of her breasts. A gasp caught in her throat, a purely involuntary sound of pleasure. He didn't push, didn't rush, but allowed his touch to linger, to tease, to build the anticipation to an almost unbearable pitch. The scent of the burning logs in the fireplace, mingled with the faint, earthy aroma of the old house and Whis's intoxicating cologne, filled her senses. The storm outside seemed to grow wilder, the wind howling like a banshee, rattling the ancient windows, but inside, the air was thick with a different kind of electricity, a silent symphony of rising desire. Whis shifted, guiding her with a gentle pressure on her back, until she was half sitting on the arm of the Chesterfield sofa, her legs tangled with his. He stood between her knees, his body a warm, solid presence against hers, his hands now resting on her hips, his thumbs tracing slow, deliberate circles over the fabric of her skirt. The friction, the heat, the sheer proximity of him was driving her to distraction. "Tell me," he murmured, his eyes locking with hers, "what is it you hope for, Ilara?" His voice was a soft challenge, an invitation to bare her soul, even as his fingers began to work their magic on the small buttons of her blouse, slowly, one by one. Her breath hitched as the top button gave way, then the second. The cool air of the room met her skin, a stark contrast to the heat blossoming beneath his touch. "Oh," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I hope for everything, Whis. Everything I never knew I could hope for." A slow, sensual smile played on his lips, a predatory gleam in his dark eyes that sent a thrill through her. "Good," he breathed, the third button yielding. "Because that is precisely what I intend to give you." His fingers, surprisingly deft and gentle, continued their work, unfastening the buttons until her blouse hung open, revealing the delicate lace of her camisole beneath. He didn't look away from her eyes, maintaining that intense, unbroken gaze as he slowly, deliberately parted the fabric of her blouse, pushing it back from her shoulders. The silk slid down her arms, a soft whisper of sound in the quiet room, pooling around her elbows. Elara shivered, not from cold, but from the exquisite vulnerability of the moment, the raw, exposed feeling that was both terrifying and utterly exhilarating. Her hands, which had been resting lightly on his chest, now found themselves gripping the lapels of his jacket, as if for an anchor in the swirling current of sensation. Whis's eyes finally dropped, sweeping over the décolletage revealed by her open blouse, lingering on the delicate lace that barely concealed the swell of her breasts. A muscle jumped in his jaw, and she saw the quickening of his breath, a confirmation that her vulnerability was not unappreciated. "Beautiful," he breathed, his voice rough with emotion. He reached out, his fingers brushing the lace, then the soft skin beneath, a touch so light it barely registered, yet it sent a jolt of pure desire through her. Her nipples hardened instantly, straining against the fabric. "Whis," she managed, a plea, a question, an invitation all rolled into one. He leaned in again, this time his lips finding the sensitive skin just below her ear, trailing a path of fire down her neck. "Let's leave this room," he whispered, his warm breath tickling her skin. "Let's find a place where our story can truly unfold, where the only witnesses are the shadows and the storm." The suggestion sent a wave of anticipation washing over her, a delicious thrill that made her heart pound even harder. She nodded, unable to speak, her body already anticipating his next move. He pulled back slightly, offering her a hand. His gaze was steady, reassuring, full of a deep, unwavering desire. Elara took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his, a perfect fit. He helped her to stand, their bodies brushing, creating new sparks, new sensations. He didn't bother to rebutton her blouse, letting it hang open, a silent testament to the intimacy that had already begun. Together they walked out of the drawing room, leaving the flickering fire and the half-empty wine glasses behind. The grand hall was darker, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the intricate carvings on the walls and the polished gleam of the marble floor. The storm's fury seemed to intensify here, the booming thunder rattling the very foundations of the old house. Whis's hand remained clasped in hers, his thumb caressing the back of her hand with a tender, reassuring rhythm. He led her towards the sweeping grand staircase, its dark wood banister gleaming in the intermittent light. Each step they took was deliberate, a shared journey deeper into the night, deeper into each other. As they ascended, the air grew cooler, carrying the scent of old wood and the clean, fresh tang of the rain. Elara felt a strange sense of liberation, walking through the shadowed house with her blouse open, her camisole exposed, her heart thrumming with a wild joy she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. Whis glanced at her, a silent question in his eyes, and she met it with a soft, confident smile. There was no shame, only a burgeoning desire, a fierce excitement for what lay ahead. They reached the landing, and Whis paused, turning to face her. His free hand reached out, cupping her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. "Are you cold?" he asked, his voice a low murmur, filled with concern, yet his eyes still burned with an unquenched fire. "No," she whispered, leaning into his touch, "I'm not cold." In truth, she felt hotter than she ever had, a delicious warmth spreading through her veins, a heat that had nothing to do with the external temperature. He smiled, a slow, tender curve of his lips that melted her insides. Then he leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, a gesture of profound affection that touched her deeply. "Good," he murmured, before turning and leading her down the long, silent corridor. The corridor was lined with portraits, their shadowy faces seeming to watch them pass, silent guardians of the house's history. But Elara felt no unease, only a heightened sense of anticipation. This was their moment, their story, unfolding in the hallowed halls of Blackwood Manor. Rhys stopped before a heavy oak door, distinct from the others. It was her room, she realized, her heart giving a hopeful leap. He pushed it open, revealing a room bathed in the soft golden glow of a roaring fire in the hearth. He must have arranged for it earlier, a thoughtful gesture that warmed her heart even further. The room was a sanctuary, a haven from the storm, from the world. He led her inside, closing the door softly behind them, plunging the room into an even deeper sense of intimacy. The only light came from the dancing flames, casting long shifting shadows on the walls, painting the room in hues of amber and gold. The air was warm, infused with the scent of burning wood and the subtle fragrance of lavender from the potpourri on her dresser. "Sit," he urged, his voice soft, guiding her towards a plush velvet armchair by the fire. Elara sank into its depths, her gaze never leaving his. He knelt before her, his strong hands taking hers, bringing them to his lips for a tender kiss. "Elara," he began, his voice laced with a raw emotion that made her ache. "I want to take my time with you. I want to savor every moment, every touch, every breath." His eyes, reflecting the firelight, were pools of deep, unyielding desire. Yet there was a tenderness there too, a promise of devotion. She could only nod, her throat tight with emotion. The sheer intensity of his gaze, the sincerity in his voice was overwhelming in the most beautiful way. He released her hands, his gaze still locked on hers, as he slowly, deliberately, began to unbutton his own jacket. The movements were fluid, graceful, each button a small reveal. He shed the jacket, tossing it onto a nearby chair, then began on the buttons of his waistcoat. Elara watched, mesmerized, her breath catching in her throat with each new glimpse of the strong, lean body beneath. The waistcoat was discarded, followed by his tie, which he unknotted with practiced ease, pulling it free and letting it fall to the floor. Then he started on the buttons of his shirt, his gaze never leaving hers, as if seeking permission with every movement. As the shirt opened, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, dusted with dark, fine hair, Elara felt a rush of heat flood her cheeks. He was magnificent, a testament to raw masculine beauty, and the sight of him, slowly undressing for her, was almost more than she could bear. Her fingers twitched, an irresistible urge to reach out and touch, to feel the warmth of his skin against hers. He pulled the shirt free from his trousers, shrugging it off his shoulders, letting it join the pile of discarded clothes. He stood before her, bare-chested, his shoulders broad, his muscles defined, gleaming in the firelight. He was a vision of strength and power, yet his eyes were soft, tender, filled with an adoration that made her feel cherished, desired beyond measure. "May I?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, his eyes dropping to her open blouse, to the lace camisole beneath. It wasn't a question of permission, not truly, but a profound respect, an invitation for her to be an active participant in their shared journey. "Yes," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper, yet firm with conviction. "Please, Rhys." He knelt before her again, his hands reaching for the silk of her blouse, gently pushing it from her shoulders, letting it fall silently to the floor. Then his fingers, warm and sure, found the delicate straps of her camisole. With a slow, deliberate movement, he slid them down her arms, letting the lace fall away, revealing her full, soft breasts, tipped with already hardened nipples. Elara gasped, a soft, involuntary sound, as the cool air met her skin, then the immediate consuming heat of his gaze. She felt utterly exposed, utterly vulnerable, yet utterly beautiful, utterly desired. There was no shame, only a profound sense of rightness, of belonging in this moment with him. He didn't touch her immediately, but simply looked, his eyes tracing every curve, every swell, every delicate shadow cast by the firelight. She saw the raw hunger in his eyes, but also a deep reverence, a tenderness that made her heart swell. "You are exquisite," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his gaze finally meeting hers. "More beautiful than any dream." Then slowly he reached out, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of her breast, circling her nipple with a feather-light touch that sent shivers of pure ecstasy through her. Her back arched slightly, her head falling back against the velvet cushion, a soft moan escaping her lips. He leaned in, his mouth finding hers again, a hungry, demanding kiss that stole her breath and ignited a fiercer flame within her. His hand moved from her breast, trailing down her belly, his touch warm and heavy, sparking a deep, aching throb low in her core. When the kiss broke, it was only for him to trail kisses down her throat, to the hollow of her collarbone, then lower, to the soft swell of her breast. His lips, warm and wet, brushed against her skin, sending delicious tremors through her. He teased, he nibbled, he tasted, driving her senses wild. Her hands found their way to his head, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer, pressing him against her. The exquisite pleasure was almost unbearable, a sweet agony that made her writhe in the chair. Then his mouth finally closed over her nipple, drawing it into his warmth, suckling softly, his tongue a velvet caress. A cry escaped her, a primal sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. Her body arched, her hips rising, pressing against his hand that was still cradling her belly. He moved between her breasts, his tongue tracing a path of fire, before moving to the other, giving it the same intoxicating attention. Illyra felt herself dissolving, melting into a puddle of pure sensation. The world outside, the storm, the house, everything ceased to exist, replaced by the overwhelming reality of his touch, his taste, his presence. He lifted his head, his eyes dark with unfulfilled desire. "Let's get you out of these clothes, love," he murmured, his voice rough with passion. He rose, offering her his hand again, pulling her gently from the chair. She stood before him, her blouse discarded, her camisole a forgotten memory. He reached for the button on her skirt, his fingers brushing against her hip, sending a fresh wave of desire through her. The button gave way, then the zipper, and with a soft rustle of fabric, her skirt slid down her legs, pooling at her feet. She stepped out of it, leaving it on the floor, clad only in her delicate lace knickers. Her cheeks flushed with a newfound boldness, a confidence born of his unwavering gaze, his obvious adoration. Rhys's eyes devoured her, a slow, appreciative sweep from her exposed breasts to her slender waist, to the curve of her hips outlined by the lace. "Stunning?" he breathed, his voice a reverent whisper. He then reached for the tie of her knickers, his fingers nimble and sure. With a gentle tug the knot came undone, and the soft lace slid down, following the path of her skirt, falling to her ankles. She stepped out of them, standing before him completely naked, bathed in the warm, flickering light of the fire. Illyra felt a thrill, a pure, unadulterated joy in her nakedness, in the knowledge that she was offering herself to him, completely, without reservation. Her body tingled, alive with anticipation, with a craving that had grown into an undeniable roar. Rhys's gaze held hers, an unspoken dialogue passing between them, a confirmation of their shared desire, their mutual surrender. He then reached for his own trousers, unbuttoning them with a deliberate slowness, letting them fall to the floor. He stepped out of them, then removed his socks, until he stood before her, as naked as she, his body a testament to strength and masculine beauty. He was magnificent. Lean and muscled, with broad shoulders, a narrow waist and strong legs. His arousal was evident, a testament to his desire for her. And the sight of it sent a fresh surge of heat through her, a tremor through her core. He reached out, drawing her into his embrace, their naked bodies meeting for the first time. The sensation was electric, overwhelming. Skin against skin, warmth against warmth. She gasped as their bodies molded together, every curve, every plane finding its perfect counterpart. His arms wrapped around her, holding her close, pressing her against the hard planes of his chest. She could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her own, a frantic rhythm that matched hers. Her hands found their way to his back, tracing the strong line of his spine, feeling the tautness of his muscles beneath her fingertips. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling her scent, a soft groan rumbling in his chest. Finally, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Finally, Elara. He lifted her into his arms effortlessly, cradling her against him as if she weighed nothing. Her legs instinctively wrapped around his waist, her arms around his neck, holding on tight. He carried her towards the bed, its plush duvet turned back, inviting and soft in the firelight. He laid her down gently on the cool, crisp sheets, his body following hers, hovering above her. Their eyes met, a silent communication of profound desire, of burgeoning love. He propped himself on his elbows, his gaze sweeping over her body, a worshipful tenderness in his eyes. "So beautiful," he murmured, his fingers tracing the curve of her hip, then moving up to cup her breast, his thumb brushing her nipple, sending a fresh wave of pleasure through her. She arched into his touch, her hips lifting, a silent plea for more. "Whis," she whispered, her voice husky with longing. He leaned down, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her lips, then to her forehead, her eyelids, the tip of her nose. He savored each touch, each taste, drawing out the anticipation, building the tension to an exquisite degree. "I want to make this unforgettable, Elara," he whispered against her mouth, his breath warm and intoxicating. "I want to etch every moment into your memory, into your very soul." His hand moved lower, between her legs, his fingers finding the soft, sensitive skin of her inner thigh, trailing upwards, closer and closer to the heart of her desire. She gasped, her body trembling with anticipation, her core aching for his touch. The storm outside still raged, a wild crescendo of wind and rain, but within the warmth of the room, surrounded by the flickering firelight and the intoxicating scent of their desire, a new story was beginning to unfold, a tale of passion, of surrender, of two souls finally finding their way home to each other. And Elara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. He leaned closer, his eyes dark as the midnight sea, holding hers captive. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the weight of long-held longing. His hand, warm and firm, settled on her waist, drawing her gently towards him until her silk-clad hips met the rough wool of his trousers. A shiver, electric and profound, coursed through her. "Elara," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her very core. "You are exquisite." His thumb brushed the sensitive skin just above the waistband of her dress, a feather-like touch that promised so much more. She swayed into him, her hands rising instinctively to rest on his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heart beneath her palms. The desire was a physical ache now, a sweet, insistent throb that pulsed in time with her racing pulse. He lowered his head, his breath warm against her temple, then her cheek. The scent of him, wood smoke, rain, and something uniquely masculine and intoxicating, filled her senses, blurring the edges of the world until only he remained. His lips, soft and tentative at first, brushed against hers. It was a question, an invitation, a promise. She answered with a sigh, parting her lips slightly, inviting him deeper. He accepted the invitation without hesitation, his kiss deepening, becoming more possessive, more hungry. It was a kiss that devoured, that claimed, that spoke of all the silent years of yearning, of a connection forged long before this night. Her fingers tangled in the soft hair at his nape, pulling him closer still, wanting to melt into him, to become one with the inferno he ignited within her. He tasted of wine and desire, a potent elixir that went straight to her head. Her body arched into his, a silent plea for more, for everything. He responded in kind, his hands sliding from her waist to her lower back, pressing her intimately against him, letting her feel the undeniable evidence of his own urgent need. A soft moan escaped her lips, lost in the depth of his kiss. When he finally broke the kiss, it was only to trail a path of fire down her jawline, across her throat to the delicate hollow at its base. "Let me," he whispered against her skin, his voice thick with emotion. "Let me love you, Elara." She didn't need to answer with words. Her trembling hands went to the buttons of his shirt, fumbling slightly in her haste, her gaze locked with his, a silent plea in her eyes. He understood. With a gentle smile that held both tenderness and raw hunger, he took her hands in his, guiding them away, and began to unfasten his own shirt, slowly, deliberately. Each button released was a small revelation, a peeling back of layers. The rough wool gave way to soft linen, then to the warm, sculpted expanse of his chest. Firelight danced across his skin, highlighting the lean muscle, the faint dusting of dark hair that narrowed towards his navel. He was magnificent, a primal force of nature, and she found herself breathless, her gaze tracing every line, every shadow, absorbing him wholly. He shrugged the shirt from his shoulders, letting it fall forgotten to the floor, joining the discarded cloak. Then, his eyes never leaving hers, he reached for the delicate silk ties of her own dress. His touch was exquisite, a whisper of warmth as his fingers brushed the sensitive skin of her back, sending delicious shivers through her. She shivered, but this time it was purely from pleasure, from the exquisite anticipation, from the profound intimacy of his touch. The dress, a soft cascade of midnight silk, pooled at her feet, leaving her standing before him in nothing but her lace chemise and stockings. The air, already warm from the fire, now seemed to caress her skin with a delicious coolness. She felt vulnerable, exposed, yet utterly powerful under his unwavering, appreciative gaze, a goddess in the flickering light. "Beautiful," he breathed. His voice, husky, reverent. His eyes lingered on the curve of her collarbone, the swell of her breasts beneath the delicate lace. He reached out, his fingers tracing the lace trim of her chemise, a light, teasing touch that sent shivers down her spine, raising goosebumps on her skin. So incredibly beautiful. She felt a blush creep up her neck, but it was a blush of pride, of a woman truly desired, truly seen. He knelt before her then, his movement fluid and graceful, his gaze still fixed on hers, unwavering. Her breath hitched in her throat as he took her hand, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles, then to the sensitive skin of her inner wrist, a silent pledge. His touch was reverent, almost worshipful, making her feel cherished. Then, slowly, deliberately, he began to unfasten the garters of her stockings. His fingers, warm and strong, brushed against her inner thigh, sending a jolt of pure pleasure through her, making her tremble. She leaned back slightly, gripping his shoulders for support, her eyes closed for a moment as she savored the sensation, the exquisite journey of his touch. The silk stockings slid down her calves, pooling around her ankles, then he removed them completely, one by one, with a gentle grace that spoke volumes of his care and tenderness. He rose then, his gaze sweeping over her, from the delicate lace of her chemise to her bare feet, lingering, adoring. The storm outside seemed to crescendo, a fitting backdrop to the tempest raging within them, mirroring the wildness of their desire. She felt utterly consumed by him, by the intensity of his gaze, by the profound promise in his eyes. He reached out, his hands cupping her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "I've wanted you for so long, Elara," he confessed, his voice raw with emotion, thick with years of unspoken yearning. "More than words can say." "And you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, thick with burgeoning tears and overwhelming desire, a confession from the depths of her soul. She stood on tiptoe, pressing a fervent kiss to his lips, a plea, a promise, a complete surrender. He lifted her then, effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing, her body light with desire. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms circling his neck, burying her face in the crook of his shoulder, inhaling his intoxicating scent, losing herself in him. He carried her to the bed, the soft mattress yielding beneath them as he gently laid her down, a feather descending. The firelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, painting the scene in hues of amber and gold, a private masterpiece. The world outside, with its raging storm, faded into insignificance. Here, in this warmth, in this moment, there was only them. Only the intensifying heat of their shared desire. Only the beginning of their story. He stretched out beside her, propping himself on an elbow, his gaze still devouring her, making her feel incandescent. He reached for the delicate straps of her chemise, sliding them down her shoulders, revealing the creamy expanse of her décolletage. Her breasts, full and eager, yearned for his touch beneath the thin lace, aching with anticipation. "May I?" he asked, his voice a low thrum that sent shivers through her. It wasn't a question of permission, but of respect, of a desire to ensure her comfort, her absolute readiness, her willing embrace of this journey. "Yes," she breathed, her voice a ragged whisper, a heartfelt plea. "Please, all of you." With a slow, deliberate movement, he peeled the lace chemise from her body, letting it float to the floor like a discarded cloud, leaving her utterly bare before him, bathed in the soft, flickering light. Her body trembled with a mixture of vulnerability and fierce longing, exposed yet empowered. His eyes, dark and intense, roamed over her, making her feel incandescent, cherished, truly seen. He kissed her then, a long, deep kiss that tasted of longing fulfilled, of promises kept. His hand, warm and calloused, cupped her breast, his thumb stroking the sensitive peak until it hardened into an aching bud, a testament to his touch. A moan escaped her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. He moved his head, trailing kisses down her throat, along her collarbone, until his lips found her breast. The exquisite sensation of his mouth closing over her, drawing her in, suckling gently, was almost more than she could bear. Her fingers tangled in his hair, holding him closer, urging him on, wanting to drown in the sensation. He moved from one breast to the other, lavishing attention on each, driving her further and further into a blissful delirium. The ache in her core intensified, spreading outwards, making her whole body throb with a delicious, undeniable need. He moved lower, his lips trailing a path of fire across her belly, his breath warm against her skin, sending delicious tremors through her. She arched her back, offering herself to him fully, her body alive with sensation, a landscape waiting to be explored. His fingers found the soft curls between her thighs, then delved deeper, finding the sensitive flesh that pulsed with her desire, teasing, coaxing. His touch was knowing, tender, yet utterly electrifying. He stroked, he teased, he explored, bringing her to the very precipice of release, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her hips began to move instinctively, seeking the pressure, the exquisite friction, a primal dance. She cried out his name, a desperate, breathless sound, a plea for completion. He shifted, rising above her, his eyes, dark with passion, meeting hers. "Look at me, Alara," he commanded softly, his voice thick with emotion, a plea for presence. "Be with me, completely." She gazed up at him, her vision slightly blurred by tears of pleasure and the intensity of the moment. She saw not just a man, but a reflection of her own longing, her own vulnerability, her own desperate need for connection. He was her storm, her calm, her beginning, and her end, her anchor in the tempest. He positioned himself between her thighs, the hard press of his erection against her aching core, a sweet torment, an agonizing promise. She gasped, her body arching upwards, silently begging him to complete the union, to fill the void. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice a low growl, his breath ragged, his eyes searching hers for affirmation. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely a breath thick with desire. "Oh yes, I am." He entered her then, slowly, carefully, allowing her body time to adjust, to stretch, to welcome him, to become one. A gasp tore from her throat, a gasp of exquisite pain, quickly followed by overwhelming pleasure as her body stretched to accommodate him. He filled her completely, a perfect, aching fullness that resonated deep within her soul, a profound sense of belonging. He paused, resting within her, allowing them both to adjust to the profound intimacy of their union, to feel the echoes of their joining. Their eyes locked, and in that gaze, she saw not just lust, but tenderness, devotion, and a deep, abiding connection. A love that transcended the physical. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of sheer joy, of gratitude, of a profound sense of coming home. Then, slowly, he began to move. A gentle rhythm at first, a slow, deliberate cadence that built steadily, inexorably, pulling her into its powerful current. She met his thrusts, her hips rising to meet him, her body moving with an innate wisdom she hadn't known she possessed. Each stroke was a wave of pleasure, building, cresting, then receding only to gather strength for the next. A relentless tide of sensation. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest raging within her. The wind howled, the rain lashed against the windows, but all she heard was the pounding of their hearts, the ragged breaths, the soft moans that escaped their lips, a symphony of passion. She was lost in sensation, in the rhythm of their bodies, in the intoxicating scent of their mingled desires, utterly consumed. He leaned down, burying his face in the curve of her neck, his lips pressing fervent kisses to her skin, tasting her. "Elara," he groaned, his voice raw with emotion. "My Elara, my love." The words, whispered against her skin, were a balm to her soul, a confirmation of something deep and fundamental, a promise whispered on the wind. She wrapped her legs tighter around him, urging him deeper, faster, craving more. The world narrowed to this bed, to their intertwined bodies, to the exquisite friction that promised oblivion, a release from all thought. Her climax built, a molten wave rising from her core, spreading through every nerve ending, every cell of her being. She cried out, a wild elemental sound as pleasure consumed her, shattering her into a million glorious pieces. Her body convulsed around him, squeezing him, drawing him deeper into the vortex, utterly undone. He followed her swiftly, his own release a powerful guttural cry, as he poured himself into her. His body trembling, his muscles taut, his breath ragged against her ear. He collapsed against her, his weight a comforting pressure, his breath hot against her ear, a shared exhaustion, a shared bliss. For a long moment, they lay tangled together, breathless, spent, the echoes of their shared rapture still vibrating between them. The storm outside seemed to quiet, as if in deference to the profound peace that had settled in the room. A gentle hush. He stirred first, lifting himself slightly, his gaze tenderly searching hers. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch light as a feather. "Are you all right?" he murmured, his voice still a little hoarse, filled with concern. "More than all right," she whispered, a soft, contented smile gracing her lips, her body humming. I'm perfect, Julian." He smiled back, a genuine heartwarming smile that reached his eyes, chasing away the last vestiges of the storm from his gaze. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then finally, a lingering soft kiss on her lips. It was a kiss of aftermath, of tenderness, of a promise yet unmade but deeply felt. He shifted, pulling the heavy furs from the foot of the bed over them, cocooning them in warmth and comfort. She snuggled closer, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, a comforting rhythm. His arm wrapped around her, holding her securely against him, a silent embrace. "I never imagined," she began, her voice soft, filled with wonder, "that it could be like this profound, this beautiful." "Nor I," he confessed, stroking her hair, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I've waited a lifetime for this feeling, Elara. For you. A lifetime I didn't even know I was waiting." A warmth spread through her, deeper and more profound than the heat of the fire or the furs. It was the warmth of belonging, of being truly seen, truly desired, truly loved. "What is your name?" she asked, realizing with a jolt that in their passionate haste they hadn't exchanged names, hadn't needed to. He chuckled softly, a low melodic sound that resonated through her. "Julian," he said. "My name is Julian." "Julian," she repeated, tasting the name on her tongue. It felt right, solid, comforting, as if it had always been there. "I'm Ilara." "I know, Ilara," he replied, tightening his embrace. "I knew the moment I saw you. Something about you. It called to me, a whisper in the wind." She closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. The honesty in his voice, the tenderness in his touch, spoke of a connection that transcended the physical. This wasn't just a night of passion born of circumstance. It was the convergence of two souls, destined to find each other in the midst of a storm, a cosmic alignment. They lay in comfortable silence for a long time, listening to the rhythmic drip of rain from the eaves, the crackle of the fire, the quiet symphony of the night. Her body, still humming with the afterglow of their intimacy, felt utterly relaxed, utterly cherished. She felt no shame, no regret, only a profound sense of rightness, of being exactly where she was meant to be. Eventually Julian stirred. "Are you hungry?" he asked, his voice a gentle rumble, a practical thought amidst the magic. "I confess, I'm ravenous." Ilara chuckled. "Now that you mention it, I am." She hadn't eaten properly since before the storm hit, and the exertion of their lovemaking had certainly worked up an appetite. He rose from the bed, his naked form silhouetted against the flickering firelight, a sight that made her heart skip a beat, a vision of raw beauty. He moved with an easy grace, retrieving his trousers and pulling them on, leaving his chest bare. He then draped a thick wool blanket around her shoulders before offering her a hand. "Come," he said, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Let's see what provisions our storm-bound haven holds, my love." Wrapped in the blanket, Ilara followed him to the small kitchenette area. The storm outside had indeed softened its fury, the wind a mere whisper compared to its earlier roar, the rain a steady patter. A faint glow of pre-dawn light was beginning to pierce through the heavy clouds, a gentle promise of a new day. Julian quickly assessed the pantry. "Ah, a true bounty," he declared, pulling out bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a bottle of wine. "And perhaps some of this?" He opened a small jar of honey, its golden contents gleaming. He set about preparing a simple but satisfying meal on the small table by the fire, his movements efficient and thoughtful, a quiet domesticity. Ilara watched him, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. There was a quiet domesticity in his actions, a sense of belonging that surprised and delighted her, a glimpse into a shared future. They ate in companionable silence, sharing the food, sharing glances that spoke volumes, a language understood without words. The wine was robust and warming, the cheese sharp, the bread fresh despite the isolation. With each bite, Ilara felt her strength returning, her senses heightened by the recent intensity of their union. "This cottage," Ilara mused, breaking the silence, her voice soft with wonder. "It feels magical, as if it waited for us, for this moment." Julian nodded, his gaze thoughtful, reflecting on her words. "Perhaps it did. It's been in my family for generations, a place of retreat, of quiet contemplation. I've always found solace here, but never. He gestured vaguely around the room, encompassing the fire, the soft light, and their shared intimacy. Never this profound sense of peace and completeness. You've brought that, Ilara. "What brings you here, Julian?" she asked, suddenly curious about the man who had so irrevocably altered her world, whose life was now intertwined with hers. He paused, swirling the wine in his glass, considering his words. "I'm a scholar," he began, his voice taking on a slightly more formal tone, "a historian. I come here to write, to research, to escape the demands of the city, the endless noise, to find quiet for thought." He smiled.